So hey guys, we're back again, and in this video we will be talking about control flow, if, else and else if statements, for loop, break and continue, while loop, switch case. But before we get into it, I just want to juggle our memory a bit, because in previous classes we talked about variables, how to declare and initialize variables. We went on to talk about format specifiers. We talked about data types, integer, char, float, double, short int, unsigned ints, and lots of them. We talked about checking sizes with size of. We went on to talk about user input, so you should know how to get user inputs and send them back using getChar or putChar, scanf and printf, fget and put. We talked about constants, and we'll be using these a lot. So these are operators, and the first one we talked about were arithmetic operators, plus, minus, times, division and the modulus. We also talk about assignment operators like this one, equal to sign, which we've been using a lot with variables. We talked about relational operators that we use to test how relative two values are to each other, greater than, and equal to, and lots of them. Also, we had the logical operators, the two ampersands and, or logical not, and also the bitwise operators. So guys, we are here, control flow, if, else and else if statements, for loop, break, continue, while loop and switch cases. And let's get to it. So we are here in our terminal. Let's create our first file. Let's call this if else.c. So let's begin. I'm going to import the header, include standard input output header. It's nice to leave a comment. So I'll just call this main because that's the function name. So let's just say if and else, then the return returns 0. So let's create our function int main. It is void. Let's just do something simple. So an if statement would always return true. So it's going to not return true, rather it's going to test if something is true, and if it is not true, it does nothing. If it is true, it does something else. So let's just do that quickly. So we say if, or let's create a variable called x is equal to 5. It's an integer, so x is equal to 5. And let's begin by, let's create, so let's do the if s is equal to 5. Remember this. Then let's print something. Let's say printf I am always equal. So let's have an else statement. Let's just do this once and for all. I am not equal. So return 0. Okay, good. So this is our very first if and else statement, and we are doing something simple. So we assign the variable x to the value of 5, and we are testing it to say if x is equal to 5, which is obviously true, It's going to print f this, I'm always equal, but if not, it should say I am not equal. So let's just check this out quickly to see the working principle. So let's compile this into if else.c, out, and let's run that. So you see, it is true and it prints out I am always equal. So what if we go in there and change the value of x? So let's say we turn the value of x to something like to 10. You already know what will happen, but let's do it. So this is not true and it's going to print the else statement. So I am not equal. All right. So you see the difference. The if statement works with the principle of checking if a condition is true, then it does what is inside of the if statement. But if it is not true, it goes downwards to the else statement. But as you can see, that was a simple application. So what if we want to create something a little bit, you know, that acts like a program? Then let's try that. So let's clear this. So let's assume we have a betting website. We want to create a betting website and we need to create the conditions to allow people to enter. So let's do that quickly. Let's say vim, and we'll call this betting.c. So the first thing we do is we import our header, include standard input output header. I'm not going to put the comments so that we can have a bigger space to work with. My screen is big. So let's create our function int main void. So let's create an integer called age that we will use to collect the age of the individuals, and let's do a printf to prompt them to enter their age. So we say, what is your age? So we are going to introduce the else if into this statement. And now that we have that, we will use a scanf to collect that. So since it's a number, we use the format specifier for number and the memory address age to store it. And now we can begin. So we start with the first condition, if, and what do we want to check? If a person, that is if age is greater than 18, then this person can actually bet. So we'll say printf, you are good to go and bet. I want this on a new line. So let's continue with our condition. Then else if. So else if is like, if the first if does not work, then let's try another if statement. That's just what it means. So you can test another condition. Let's check for those that are greater than 0. That is someone who is greater than 0, you know, no one is lesser than 0. And probably the age is also less than 18. So these are people that are less than 18 years old. Obviously they can't play, right? So we say printf, sorry, you cannot bet. Then let's do another else if, so that you can see that we can have multiple else ifs. So age is less than 0. So this one should be less than equal to. So if age is less than 0, this person obviously is not human. Or we say you're not born yet. Print F. Sorry, you are not born yet. Then we can return the value of our function, and we can close everything. So let me walk you through what we've done here. So what we've done here is we've created a simple script that checks the age of individuals, if they can bet or not. So the first thing we did was we assigned a variable to age. Okay, it's an empty variable, we only declared it. Then we have a printf that asks them what is their age. Then we use scanf to collect the age that they enter. Then after collecting the age, we now go ahead to test the age against different cases. So the first if we are checking is if the age is greater than 18, if the age entered is greater than 18, then we tell them that they are good to go and bet. But if the age is greater than or equal to 0 and less than 18, we tell them that sorry, you cannot bet. If their age is now less than 0, we tell them that sorry, you are not born yet. And as you can see, I just found an issue. So we do not put a final else statement. You see why it is good to run through your code. So else, what happens if all the condition fails? We say something like, sorry, we know nothing about you. So this is when if all condition fails. Okay, now let's go and test our script. We have 3 conditions to test. So we save this. So let's compile this into betting.out. I did not close this guy. Line 10. So you have to close all your statements with a semicolon. So let's compile it again. Compile successfully. And let's run it. So what is your age? Let's start with someone that can bet 35. And it says you are good to go and bet. Okay. Now, what is your age? So let's use someone that is less than 18. 14. Sorry, you cannot bet. You see that? Okay. So let's do someone that is less than 0. So that would be like -3. So it says, you see, sorry, you are not born yet. And let's do something entirely. Let's type something else that is not an integer. And it says, sorry, you cannot bet. So the problem is it's still testing it, because you can actually test the value of characters as integer. So the point is, when you do something that does not exist, then it falls to the else statement. But before you get to the else statement, all the if and else if will be tested. So that is the idea. So you can have as many else if as you want in a statement, but it is not advisable because it doesn't look nice. That's the point. But you can use else if for as long as you want. So let's clear this and let's continue. But there is an alternative to using a lot of else if, and that is the switch statement. So the switch statement is an alternative to the if and else statement. Imagine having 10 if and else statements. It's not nice, or else if. So instead of doing that, we can use a switch statement, and let's create our first switch statement. So switch statement uses what we call cases. So it tests your cases against different conditions to check if they are true. So let's create a switch statement quickly. stdio.h and int main void so return so I just want to put the return there so that we can work independent of it. All right, now to create a switch statement is very easy. So let's create an application that collects grade and compares them. So character grade, so this is the variable, we declare it, then let's prompt the user to enter a grade. So printf, please enter your grade to see remark. So you have to enter your grade to see the remark that you got from your teacher. So now scanf so it's a character, then the memory location, and now we can create our switch statements. So to begin, we say switch, and what are we testing? We are testing for grade, and we are testing for grade, enter. Then the first case we are testing is A, capital A. These are the grades that we want to test. So you remember in school you have A, B, C, D, E, F. So you use a colon, then if the grade is A, then we can print something out. You are an excellent student. Then we break out of that. Then we proceed to our next case. So maybe that should be case B. Okay. And we do the same thing. Print F. We say good student. Then we break out of these two. Let's create a third case. Let's do 3 cases. Case C. So print F, we say you did well. Break. So we use break so that our statement does not continue running when we are done, when it matches a condition. So default is what happens when nothing matches any of the cases. So we can put a default case and say we don't understand your grade, or we don't know your grade, or no remark. So let me explain what we've done here. So the first thing we did was we declared a variable called grade, which is a character type. Then we are prompting the users to enter their a grade to see the remark. So that is what we are telling them here. Enter your grade to see a remark. So if you score A, you should see a remark for A. Let me put this on a new line. So scanf is used to collect the input, and since we are collecting a grade, we use the format specifier of character, and we use the memory location of that character. Now we are testing the grade using the switch statements, and the first case is A, capital A. So if you put in capital A, it should give you this, or capital B, it should give you good student, or capital C, it should give you did well. If you put in anything else, it will tell you no remark. So let's test this out. So imagine you have an if and else statement. You can use an if and else if statement for this, but it won't look as nice as it is or as it looks like when you use a switch statement. So save this and let's compile. So let's compile this to a file called switch.out. That is wrong. Oh, sorry. So switch.c. So we have some problem. It says the break statement not within loop or switch. So let's go and fix that. Let's see why that is. Break. Okay, so let's check this out. So the error here is our semicolon, our bracket is missing. So let's put the first opening bracket here and go down to the bottom just before return. Okay, and close it. That's all. So take note of what has happened, and now we can save this, we can clear, and we can recompile. So the file has been compiled successfully. So let's run it. So I'm going to enter capital A, and as you can see, it says you're an excellent student. I'm going to use capital B, and you see it says good student. So you see the switch cases are matching. So let's run this again. I'm going to enter C, and it says you did well. And let's run it again. I'm going to enter D. There is no case for D. So you see it says no remark. There is no case for D. So you see, when you have a lot of things to test, you can use a switch statement to go over them instead of using a long else if statement. So that is that, and in the next one we'll be talking about for loop. So you use a for loop to loop over conditions that you know how many times you want them to run. So let's create it. Let's say for.c. Let's create our header. Include standard inputs.output. Int main. So a for loop is a loop that does a repeated task, like it repeats something more than once. So let's assume I want to print hello to you 10 times. I can do it like this: for, then we initialize the variable I is equal to 0. Okay, then we set the condition as long as I is less than or equal to 10. Then we increment it, so I plus plus, and what should it do? It should print F. It should say hello my friend for this number of times. Okay, so we return 0. So this simple for loop is going to print hello my friend probably 9 or 10 times. Let's see. And the first thing first is you have to initialize the variable. After initialization, you set the condition, and after the condition you set the increments like we've done. So you have to initialize, then you set the increments for the script to work. So let's check this out. By compiling it, for.c, let's compile it to output.c. 4.output, 4.out. Okay, so let's run this. And as you can see, hello my friend has been printed out repeatedly. So let's do a combined loop. So first thing first is, let me put a new line here. Also, we can create another loop, and maybe what this does is we can print out a series of numbers. Okay, 4 and int j is equal to 0 as long as j is less than or equal to 20. So let's increment j. So we can print out j, we can say number, format specifier for number. And what are we printing out? J. So for every increment, j will be looped over and printed out. Okay, so what we've done here is we want to do number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So let's see how it turns out to be. So compile. Let me clear it. So you can see we have my friend printed out, and we have number 0, number 1, number 2, number 3 till number 20. So that's basically your for loop in action. Also, you can have a nested loop. So a nested for loop works this way. So let's edit this. So a nested for loop is a loop inside a loop. So you have a loop inside of a loop. So for every time the first outer loop runs, the inner one does something. So to put a loop inside of a loop is, we can just call this now, we can say, I will say start of outer loop. Then we create our for loop inside. So we would use j. Int j is equal to, let's use something small, let's say 5. Then j plus plus. Then let's print out something, let's say inner loop. So this is j. So inner loop is done, and now that we are done with inner loop, then we can now close the outer loop again. So we say printf end of outer loop 1. Yes, so let's give it, so that we'll know which loop it is. I. Let's do the same thing for this guy, outer loop, so we'll know which loop it is. I. So we don't need this line anymore. So what we have here now is we have an outer loop, and inside of our outer loop we have an inner loop. So for every one iteration of this outer loop, the inner loop is going to run. So let's make this 3. So the outer loop will run 1. Once it runs once, it will jump inside and run this inner loop four times, then go back again and run the outer loop. So let's just see it in action instead of trying to explain it. So compile. Okay. So we have an error somewhere, and this is it. So we initialized it without setting the value to anything. Then J, okay. So this should fix it now. Let's compile. Okay. Errors are good. It teaches you how to debug. So when you have errors, you go in there and you fix them. So let me try to compile again. I used another one, print, instead of printf. Why do I keep doing this every time? So printf. And this one, so let me look at it line by line, so to instead of going back and forth. So this should be correct now. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we are on track now. J is greater than or equal to, not equal to and greater than. So it's less than or equal to 5. It has compiled now. So let's run it. So you won't see it properly. So let me go and put new line characters for each of them so that it's very visible for us. So let me format it a little. So this is a nested loop. This is a nested loop. So you can see what has happened. The first loop ran, then it went inside to run the inner loop, then end of outer loop, start of outer loop, then inner loop. You see, so this is how a nested loop works. It runs inside of itself. So that is it on inner loop in for loop. Now there is something else I want you to see, and it's called break and continue. So for break and continue, it's how you jump out of codes. So let's work on this loop again. So now we have this loop. For us to use the break and continue, we have to use an if statement. Okay, we need an if statement. So let's edit this loop to use it for our break. So the first one is break. So let's do 10. Then we do something. So for you to break out of a code, you use if condition. We say if I is equal to, let's say, 6. Let's break out of 6. Then what should happen? It should break. Okay, so let's print out the numbers here. Number. Okay, so we are breaking out, and this is what this code is going to do. Break. So let's quickly run it and see. Compiled and run. As you can see, when it got to 6, it didn't, you see, it was supposed to get to 10, but it didn't get there. It broke out when it got to 6, and the execution of the code was cut short. Okay, and if we use continue, so instead of break, let's switch it to continue. So for continue is going to jump. Continue means jump. So let's compile and run. So you see the difference between break and continue. Break jumps out of the code entirely, while continue runs the code continuously. But when it got to cease, it skips it. So continue will skip, while break will break out. Okay, so the next loop is going to be the while loop. So let's clear our page and let's start our while loop. So let's call this file while. So while.c, include standard input output header. So int main void return 0. So a while loop is a loop that runs for as long as you want. So maybe you don't know how long you want your loop to run, you use a while loop. So what we can do here is, the first thing is you set the initializer, you declare your variable. So int I is equal to, let's call this 1. Then you set the condition while I is lesser than or equal to 20. Okay, then what should it do? That's just it. So while this condition is true, you should go ahead to do what? Print f number I. So you should print I repeatedly. But don't forget that you have to increment. Okay, for every loop you have to increment it so that it will not be a perpetual loop which can break your computer. So let's put this on a new line. So let's see what we've done here. The first thing first is we initialize. You can see it looks like a for loop. You initialize, then you set the condition, then the statements, then the increment. And that is how it works. Okay, so we want to print from 1 to 20 and only while this condition is true. So this is the syntax of your while loop, and let's run it. So let's run this, the while loop. And as you can see, it works as it's supposed to. So it says number 1 to 20. So that is how while loop works. Okay. So let's look at it. So this is it again. Include. So the integer was set to 1 and it started counting from as long as 1 is lesser than or equal to 20. It will keep printing the number till this condition becomes false. So when I becomes 21, it will stop. That is why I didn't print anything anymore. The next loop is the do while loop. So let's use this while file. Let's just edit it. So for the do while loop is basically like the while loop, but the difference is that it does something before the condition becomes true once before it runs the while loop. So let's just switch it around. So instead of this, you have a do loop here. You have what we call this, the do statement. So it says do this while this is true. So this condition now has to move to the bottom. That's the while condition. It has to move now to the bottom. So let's take it out and let's paste it here. Okay, so look at how it's switched around. So the do while loop is going to do this once before it checks for the while condition. So anything that is inside do will be printed once. So let's confirm that. I can do something else and say, let's make this condition to be false. So as long as I is equal to 0, I is equal to 1, I is less than or equal to 20. So let's say I is less than 1, which we know is not true because I is 1. And let's see what happens. This condition is going to run before the condition is tested. So look at it like you enter into your apartment. Before you do anything, you have to put on the switch. Okay, so the do loop, which is not common, you use it to run a condition once before the condition is tested. So let's do this and see if it works. So let's compile. Okay, we didn't close that, so let's close it. Don't always forget your semicolon to end every statement. I tend to forget it a lot. So let's compile successfully, clear, and let's run it. And as you can see, it only ran once and the condition did not run again because it is not true. So that is it, guys. In this video, we've been able to touch on, even though it was very simple, on if and else if and else statements. We talked about switch statements, then the for loop, the break and continue, while loop, and the do while loop. So guys, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.